The Ward usually comes up in conversations as one of John Carpenter's worst movies, or at least the movie that people forget even exists. And while I was watching it, I kept thinking, forgettable might be the most honest reaction that people have to this. But instead of asking whether The Ward was good or bad, I found myself stuck on a different question while I was watching it. Why does this movie feel so emotionally quiet? And once I started paying attention to that, I couldn't stop noticing it. I am Brandy, otherwise known as the Terrorific Lady, and welcome to Retro Horror School, where we discuss, dissect, and analyze horror from the 1970s through the 2010s. Class is in session. On paper, The Ward is a movie that should work. It's institutional horror. It's psychological horror. It's set inside a psychiatric ward, which is already a setting and a space where a lot of tension should take place. It also has a lot of power imbalance and lack of control baked into the setting already. We start with ambiguity and a mystery. A woman burns down a farmhouse and wakes up inside a psychiatric ward. There's a sense that something isn't right. There are rules, authority figures, other patients, and a sense that something is wrong, even if we don't fully realize it yet. Honestly, the early parts of this movie held my attention the most. I kept waiting for the movie to start pushing those elements further, to interrogate the space or the system or the people running it, and that push never really comes. One of the things that stood out to me pretty quickly was how the ward itself functions as a space. We see hallways, rooms, locked doors, routines, but the environment itself never really escalates. It doesn't tighten and it doesn't become unpredictable. It doesn't start working against the characters in any kind of meaningful way. And that's something I always notice in John Carpenter's films, even the messy ones and even the flawed ones. Space usually matters. You feel the containment. You feel the pressure. You feel the geography and the surroundings working as part of the threat. Here, the ward feels more like a neutral backdrop rather than a system. I always knew where the people were at all times, and I never felt like the environment itself was doing anything to heighten the tension. And once I noticed that, well, it became really hard to unnotice. The same feeling carried over into how authority is treated in the movie. We have doctors, nurses, orderlies, rules, structure. All the ingredients for institutional horror are right there. However, the institution itself isn't challenged. Authority is never interrogated or held to task. There's no sense that the system itself is unstable or dangerous. And by the end of the film, that authority is actually reaffirmed, and this felt strange to me. Not because every horror movie needs to tear and burn institutions down, but because this setting almost invites that kind of tension and then refuses to engage with it. It's like the movie beckons and gestures toward critique and then backs away. The same thing happens with the psychological horror. The ward flirts with uncertainty and unreliability, but once the twist arrives, the movie becomes very invested in explaining itself.
You were abducted from your home the night of September 3rd, 1958.
I'm Kristen. Not Alice. I'm Kristen.
You were left chained up in the basement of an abandoned farmhouse for nearly 2 months. The same farmhouse you burned down. You were only 11 years old. Half-starved, sick with fever, trapped in the darkness. It was a waking nightmare. Your only escape was into delusion. In order to survive the trauma, your psyche fractured.
Ambiguity disappears, loose ends are tied up in a neat little bow, discomfort is smoothed over. Instead of sitting with the unease, the film reassures you that everything is okay now. And that's where I felt myself being disengaged. The mystery stopped being something that I needed to wrestle with and instead just became neatly resolved. The emotional experience of this film is something I keep coming back to because it's very hard to explain without me sounding or dismissive. I wasn't bored. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even frustrated. I just felt very neutral. The movie kept moving along. Scenes happened. Reveals landed. But emotionally, everything stayed flat. And that emotional flatness, it started to feel consistent with everything that I noticed about this film. The space doesn't escalate. Authority isn't challenged or questioned. The horror resolves itself instead of lingering. Nothing pushes. When I compare The Ward to John Carpenter's other late career horror films, this is where the difference really shows. Even in movies like Vampires or Ghosts of Mars, as silly or over the top as they are, there's still something being wrestled with. Institutions, labor, power, burnout, control. Here in The Ward, I struggled to even find that tension because the movie doesn't seem interested in arguing with itself. And that absence is consistent. It's not just a single scene that just felt meh. It's an entire movie operating without that urgency. So I don't really want to end this retrospective with any kind of verdict. I don't want to say whether this movie is good or bad. Because The War doesn't feel like a movie that fails loudly. It feels like a movie that doesn't fully engage with its audience. And that raises a bigger question for me about late career work in general. What does it look like when a filmmaker stops arguing with the material? Is that failure? Is it disengagement? Or is it simply what happens when the urgency is gone? The Ward doesn't give me enough about what John Carpenter was trying to say, but it gives me a lot to think about when a voice goes quiet. So I'm curious to hear how The Ward lands for you. Did this movie feel empty or restrained? Do you read the quietness of this film as intentional or absence? And where does this film sit for you in John Carpenter's filmography? Did you even know this was a John Carpenter film? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this retrospective with a John Carpenter fan. Class is dismissed, everybody, for now, but I will see you next time. Bye!